what made you write this book on purpose? And do you feel that you personally have found your purpose? And if you did, what would that be?
Wow, very personal question.
Yeah.
So I think that from very early on, was exposed to the Rebbe, and having spent so much time at Farbrengens and on the lines to receive dollars and to receive various Sfarim, holy books, I think what I internalized, even at that young age, was that I'm sitting or standing, depending on if it was a Farbrengen or otherwise, in the presence of someone who literally the most purpose-driven tzaddik one could
Mhm,
encounter. Every moment was sacred. Every encounter was all powerful. And I think that activated in me the part that each one of us has, the part of us that seeks to make a difference in this world, the part of us that
mhm,
recognizes that we are here to serve, that we are,
mhm,
as the Mishnah beautifully puts it, and essentially, this is the ultimate mission statement of humankind. Ani nivresi l'shamash eskoini. Each of us was put into this world and was created in order to take part in a mission given
mhm,
to each one of us by Hashem, our master, our creator. I think humanity's hardwired for purpose. I mean, we have the
mhm,
famous example in the wonderful book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
mhm,
And he talks a great deal about, even from, if you will, a psychological point of view, how purpose is the ultimate drive in the human being. One of the classic examples he gives there is that he says that the survival rate or the survival ability of people in Auschwitz, which is, of course, the ultimate, if you will,
mhm,
laboratory or, place to experiment topics like, you know, what drives a human being.
mhm,
Um, and he said that it wasn't in the end about brute force or physical strength. It was about how deeply the individual was connected to a particular purpose. He said if a
right.
person, for example, was an author and they had a book they felt they needed to give the world, they needed to share with the world, very
Mm,
often that became their survival mechanism. That
mm,
became the means by which they were able to do superhuman things. Nothing
mm,
else could bring them to that state of of superhumanness, if you will, but
mm.
for that drive and that a deep identification with a particular purpose. And he gives many other such examples. So I
So
think
is that
each
what you
one,
feel is your purpose? You have those books within you that you want to bring to the fore?
um, it didn't start off with books per se, but ideas, and not my own. Actually,
Ideas. Hmm.
the reality is, any good idea I share comes from a source. I think the secret in life is finding the source of wisdom and then trying to hopefully share it with the world. You know,
Does one have to have like a 5 year or 10 year plan in order to do that, or you just go with the flow of what comes up?
no, I think determination and grit is extremely valuable in executing one's purpose in life, right? Because this
Hmm.
world really does pose a tremendous amount of distractions, especially with technology and the digital world and so on. But
Hmm.
back to the point, I think we each have a point of purpose within us, and we each have a deep inner knowledge and sense that we're here for a reason and we're here to serve. And the question is only when that is activated in each one of us. Some
Hmm.
people, it's activated when they're 50 or 60 or 70, when they finish a career in finance or banking.
Hmm.
And it's very
Hmm.
interesting that over the past few years, a number of extremely accomplished individuals who I know have sat with me and they said, after retiring, and they have enough, Baruch Hashem, enough resources to last many, many lifetimes. And they said, but now what? When I was doing
Hmm.
research on the book, I encountered a really interesting stat, which says that the two most um, vulnerable years, or the highest mortality in a person's life, is their first year of life and the year they retire.
Hmm.
And it makes a lot of sense because a person who retires essentially is moving away from something that gave them a sense of purpose for many, many decades.
Hmm.
And so I think each one of us has a point of purpose, and the question is only when and how it's activated. And if I'm being very candid, in my life, I feel like it was activated very, very early on as a
Hmm.
result of my exposure to the Rebbe. And I think
Hmm.
We can say the same for many, many, many Hasidim, Shluchim. I would even say everyone who encountered the Rebbe experienced that activation. I would go so far as to say that that was the purpose, that was the guiding principle of the Rebbe's interactions with human beings. It was, how can
Mhm.
I activate their purpose in this interaction? It's
Mm.
incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Take even just one example of the late Rabbi, Rabbi Sachs of blessed memory.
Mm.
He didn't meet the Rebbe many times. You can count on one hand how many times he physically met the Rebbe. Really. And yet, time and again, he would say that the reason I became a rabbi and I
Mm.
dedicated myself to creating Jewish scholarship and rabbis in the Jewish community was because of one exchange with the Rebbe, one or two or three, in which the Rebbe actually activated my purpose. It's
Mm.
it's really, really powerful to note. And that's, I believe, also that was at the root of, for example, the Sunday dollars, right? It's a radical fact. It's just, think about it. An individual in his late 80s, early 90s, standing for
Mm.
8 hours on end. There was no vetting process, interestingly enough, right? Think about it. Most leaders or world
Mm.
leaders or global leaders start
Of
off their
course.
careers very accessible to the masses. They're busy giving talks in the town hall and all of that. And speaking about Joe the plumber, if you remember,
Mhm.
and then by the time they're in their second term of office, Joe the plumber is long forgotten, and they're busy talking about global issues, saving the universe and history at large, and they become less and less and less accessible.
Mhm.
The Rebbe, Lahavdil, the Rebbe became more and more accessible, if you will, as he grew into as he led the Jewish people and and humanity at large. Really, you had no
Mhm.
vetting process. Anyone and everyone could come see the Rebbe for a brief exchange. And what happened during that meeting? What happened essentially? The Rebbe gave them a dollar bill and made them a messenger, turned them into a giver. Here too, what a
Mm.
powerful idea in a generation that I think could safely and justifiably be called a generation of takers, a
Mhm.
generation where the self focus is just extraordinary, and sometimes, and in many cases, to a great fault. The Rebbe says to the individual in front of him, the world might call you a taker. You might even see
Mhm.
yourself as a taker, but no, you are not. You are my ambassador. You are God's ambassador through me, perhaps, but you are God's ambassador to bring light, to bring goodness, to bring kindness, generosity into this world. It was the message the Rebbe shared with the New York Times reporter who asked the Rebbe quite clearly what his mission was. And the Rebbe said to him that it was the Rebbe's 90th birthday. He said, "What's your message to the world on your 90th birthday?" The Rebbe said that the Hebrew letter, which is the equivalent of the number 90, is tzaddik. Tzaddik means a righteous person. And the Rebbe said, 90, therefore, is my message to each and every individual I meet to become that tzaddik,
Mm.
become a righteous person in their environment, activating the purpose in every person the Rebbe met. So that's a very honest answer about, from very early on, this sense of what can I do? How will I impact this world? What's my personal mission? And then growing up and learning the Rebbe's Torah, because if you really want to know someone, you have to know how they think. And the only way to know how they think is to read their thoughts.
Mhm. Mhm.
Very similar. There were numerous times where people came to the Rebbe. One instance, someone had a picture had been. I heard this from Rabbi Joseph Telushkin, a very dear friend, the author of a book about the Rebbe. And someone had taken. There were the people. There was a photographer who took pictures of these encounters on Sundays, and someone had a picture of himself and the Rebbe, and he came to the Rebbe and he asked the Rebbe to autograph it. And the
Mm.
Rebbe said to him that ostensibly this is to forge a connection between us. If you really want to connect with me, the Rebbe said, study what I study.
Mhm.
And I would add, study what I teach. The Rebbe didn't
Mhm.
say that, but that's, I think, an extension of this idea. The same happened actually. Someone asked the Rebbe, he had a hat, and he says he wanted to know which hat the Rebbe wore so he could
Mm.
wear a hat. Like the Rebbe said, what's more important than what's on one's head is what's inside one's head. Beautiful
Right.
story. So that's really
Abs
it. That's how I began to resonate with these themes more and more. And essentially, the way I would put this particular book is I tried to codify the Rebbe's teaching
Mhm.
on purpose, okay? Because
Mhm.
in the end, there's much I couldn't include
Mhm.
because of brevity, because just at some point you have to close the book. You have to put it
Mhm.
down and say, this is what it is. And, I might add a little bit here or there, but,
Mhm.
so a codifying, trying to take and extract principles from the Rebbe's correspondence, from the Rebbe's
Mhm.
interactions with people, and so on, and turn it into a system that can hopefully help people in their lives discover their life's purpose.